Hello again, everybody, and welcome Beyond the Drip, a podcast about all things infusion. Super excited to be here today. This is episode number 4, and here with all of my co-hosts, Brian O'Sullivan, Pam McIntrye, and Brandon Carpenter. Hey, everybody, how are we doing today?
Great, John.
Doing awesome.
Good. Well, guys, we've got an exciting guest today. So if you know anything about Beyond the Drip, we move in between topic and guests. And one of the things we like to do is go out and get guests who have two sides to it, right? Our last guest was Reese Norris, founder, COO of We Infuse. And now we have Randy Broyles, the Chief Strategy Officer of CSI Infusion. Hey, Randy, how are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for having me today. I'm excited to be here with all of you for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Randy, it's really exciting to have you on here. When we started thinking about, hey, what type of guest do we want on Beyond the Drip? We really have to have someone who understands all four kind of quadrants of our podcast. For those of you just joining us who maybe don't know, or this is your first time watching or listening to Beyond the Drip, there's really 4 quadrants to us. Brian O'Sullivan's our payer guy. He owns O'Sullivan Group, payer strategy, credentialing. Brandon Carpenter's our tech and data guy. He owns MedEdge, and that is a software and technical services and data services company to, I guess, AICs, infusion companies, specialty infusions, specialty pharmacies, everybody, Brandon. Pam McIntrye owns Infusion Nurse Consulting, and she owns that and runs it, and she goes around the country setting up infusion nursing, setting up ops, Pam setting up home infusion, AICs, all these things, right? I'm the only person who doesn't own anything, so that's terrible. I'm vice president of pharmacy services for ProChant, and my world is revenue cycle. And so, Randy, I'm just thinking about how you probably have an understanding of all of those things. I think what we want to start out with is kind of talk about your history. Now, we've gone back. I probably don't go back as far as Brandon with you, but maybe you could start back and just kind of walk us through. I mean, where did you break into infusion? Was it Walgreens, or was there something before that?
Wow, I don't know if we have that much time to go that far back, but I'd say where I first got the inkling for it was I was an intern at Children's Hospital as a pharmacist there, and I really loved the IV room, and I had a great opportunity to be in the IV room a lot, and ended up being a pharmacist there for the first year. And so I loved the infusion aspect, the TPN aspect, and that's where I guess I developed my love for infusion. But then it didn't really hit me until I left after my first year there at Children's, and then got into like a retail doctor's office kind of pharmacy environment, and did that for a little while. And I really was just missing the love that I had for infusion, and ended up getting an opportunity with a company called Integrity Healthcare. Integrity Healthcare was a regional infusion pharmacy that was based in Louisville, Kentucky. And by the time I was, I guess, a pharmacy manager in the Columbus office, Columbus, Ohio, and had an opportunity to build that up. And they gave me a second pharmacy and then a third pharmacy. And the rest is more growth and opportunity there for me. So I suppose it was all the way back. That's probably almost 24, 25 years ago now, John. So it's been a couple years, been a minute or two.
It's incredible. Now we met. I'm gonna make you fast forward, because I think all of our listeners, you built this incredible career. When I meet you, you're like senior vice president of ops for BioRx, I think. Massive IG shop. When you go to, NHIA or specialty, it's Bauer at that time, right? 2013, right. Bauer, you got to do it like BioRx. We want to grow like BioRx. I'll give you all the flowers here. That's what the kids say. You were running ops for something. Brandon, am I wrong? Everybody wanted to be BioRx, right, Brandon?
Yeah,
100%.
Well, I was given a great opportunity. When I was in Home Infusion, I was a regional director. I was able to run multiple locations. Had an opportunity through acquisitions to got to be Walgreens Home Infusion, right? Or Walgreens Option Care. Walgreens Option Care taught me how to micromanage a penny, and that micromanaging of a penny is what actually launched me into an opportunity with Eric and Phil from BioRx. I was interviewing to actually open a location for them in 2010 in Arizona, and then with my experience, they thought it was a great opportunity for them to have sort of a national person that can help them build their pharmacy. So when I started with BioRx, we were a single location with sort of a half location in Iowa. And I began opening locations for us. So I started building one in Boston. We opened one in Phoenix, Arizona. We opened one. We opened one in North Carolina. So I just kept opening pharmacies, building those pharmacies to be successful in what they do, and then helping incorporate all that into the growth engine that was BioRx, which really we did a great job of taking care of patients in the IG world for sure. So I guess I've done a lot of that, Jon, and we can go into more detail if you want to hear all the fun things that I've been through with that.
Yeah, I mean, well, I'm sure Pam's ears popped up when you said taking care of patients is what's important, because that's what Pam does. That's what she cares about. So, we don't have enough time to go through everything, but I am interested in how, you guys, so how do you build, you're building out BioRx, right? How do you build this out? And what type of scale does it take? I mean, how many years did it take to go from what you were talking about, I'm going to open up one, to when I meet you in like 2014, it's like, this is a monster.
Well, when I started, I had already experiencing opening locations for my previous role with Integrity Healthcare Home Infusion, right? We opened several locations, so I had some experience there. So really, I was able to open about 1-2 a year, really on that front end of it. And the key to all of it, truthfully, Jon, is finding the right on-site leader that can help hold people accountable and help drive the organizational goals for you as you kind of begin to focus on where the next location to open is. And then just working through the accountability component of that. So BioRx was more of a centralized operations kind of a place. So we did centralized intake, we did centralized billing, centralized reimbursement collections. So it really helped growing the pharmacies, because I really just needed to open up a dispensing location, right? A dispensing location that offered the ability to do nursing or some of the other things that were more local to those patients.
Yeah. So, okay. So let's fast forward again. You guys grow this monster, and then you sell it, right? I get this phone call. Hey, Diplomat's buying. And I mean, at the time, and I don't know everybody who's listening, but most of you who are listening have any gray hairs know there was a time in all of pharmacy, the words Diplomat was like, whoa, like this was Diplomat, like, right? Michigan Diplomat, which I can't believe you sold to a Michigan guy, but we'll talk about that later, being the Ohio State University guy. But what changed? I mean, your role stayed the same?
Not necessarily. I think what my role ended up being is becoming more of a leader for the overall operation. So not just pharmacy, but I had nursing, I had HR, I had compliance, I had the full gamut of intake and some of the other components that you have. So really I evolved as a leader through that process. Luckily, Eric and Phil were great to give me opportunities to make mistakes where I could. And that helped me become a better leader and better manager for those individual growth roles, right? So I guess I started as a national director, had an opportunity to become a VP at some point of operations, where I oversaw the nursing and the pharmacy and some of those other components. And then we began adding locations to the point of it was just time for BioRx, right? It was time. We were running against where we thought we were growing. We were running up into opportunities that were limiting us from being a preferred provider for an individual organization, because we didn't do specialty specific pharmacy, right? Or we didn't do anything other than TPN. So it really was just time for us to have another opportunity to expand into a bigger organization. Yeah. And that helped fuel our growth really for the next 6 or 7 locations that we opened thereafter.
Yeah, it just kept growing. It kept growing. In fact, I mean, many of us were looking, I'm sure this might, but many of us were looking at Big Diplomat, really starting to fail, and say, man, I'm glad they got Diplomat specialty down there, Infusion, making all that money for them, right? And I'm sure they did too.
Yeah.
But then, like all things, right? You build this, you build the next thing great, and then it sells again. Right? And this time it sells to the mothership, right? Optum. Yeah. Like United Healthcare Optum, right? The big.
The big O, if you will. Absolutely. So That was an incredible experience, right? I think, first of all, when we came together as Diplomat, they already owned two other pharmacies. They owned MedPro RX, which had a pretty good IG and hemophilia presence in the East Coast.
Right.
And then they also had a company called AHF, which was a primarily hemophilia company out of Connecticut. Okay. And really, once we joined, we were able to kind of combine all three of those pharmacies into a Diplomat Specialty Infusion Group. And then that's where we began to acquisitions and had the opportunity to expand into different markets. We went to New York. We got out to California. We had all kinds of other opportunities that were kind of a growth engine. And the main reason we grew, Jon, is number one, we had the investment support through Diplomat that really helped us grow, but also we just took care of patients. We knew that was a priority as an organization, and all of our processes aligned with that as well. So, anything was patient first, and that's kind of what helped fuel our growth.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think that's where we're all at, right? We get to a place where sometimes we forget about that, putting the patient first is not just good for the patient. It's really good for your organization.
It's very clear, right? You take good care of your people. Your people take great care of patients because they're taken care of well. And it's a formula for success. It's how you grow. It's how you build. I think as we went to the Big O, maybe I didn't talk enough about that, but that was really an exciting, fun time for us initially. We ended up implementing our system and into their system, or their system into our system, and kind of integrated those 17 pharmacies that we had at the time into the Optum machine. Had an opportunity then to run Optum Infusion, where we had 59 locations. Wow. And that was a huge undertaking, and I learned so much about big, enormous corporations and how you do business through that process, and really had an opportunity to learn how to work and help other people manage areas that I didn't necessarily have direct control over. And that kind of was a great experience for me. So it was different, though. It was definitely different.
Yeah, absolutely. Was there a time that you got so big? I guess I'm going to assume that you did. You got so big personally that you no longer took Brandon Carpenter's phone calls. When was that exactly?
It was somewhere around 2017, I think, is when I stopped having to talk to Brandon.
I thought it was 2011, Randy. I mean, just like, yeah.
It's so funny. I guess I think I was around when Brandon even started in this industry. That's how old I am in this stuff. I remember working with Pete a lot. And,
when he found out what an I-9 code was. That's came in as a coder,
I think I did take 2 meetings with you, Randy, at CuraScript. Just FYI. I think.
Okay.
And then you kind of went quiet, and
I believe that. All right. Yeah. So maybe it was before 2010. All right.
Yeah.
Well, certainly a storied career. So now you're at the mothership. Now I don't know this story, so I'm going to find out live. So I don't know if you said, "Hey, I'm gonna go," or if what happens to all great people once they say, "Hey, we picked up this asset. Let's squeeze every ounce of knowledge out of them and then find somebody that can do their job much cheaper," which I assume might happen, which is what always happens. Pam, we've heard about that, right? Like he comes in or something, but something made you not be at the Big O anymore, right?
Yeah. So I'll give you the brief details of it. Okay. The brief details are that I had some potential opportunities that I thought I had at Optum. I interviewed for some additional roles that were a little higher up than where I was. Wasn't necessarily given that opportunity. And so I started to feel like I needed something more. And one day, I've always been the person that's going to tell you like it is, right? I'm a tell you like it is kind of guy. I'm going to do it respectfully. And I told the wrong person like it is at Optum. And next thing you know, they had a retirement package for me. So
is that all it takes?
That's all it takes, is just tell the right person your opinion about something. And next thing you know, they no longer need your position.
Optum, so they came to pick up Randy. And they said, "Hey, you sit in the front seat." And he's like, "What?" They said, "This guy's going to sit behind you in the back." And you're like, "Wait a second. I've seen this movie, guys. I've seen this. This is my last car ride."
We're going to take you and make you a made man, Randy.
Yeah,
that's
sure
good.
we are. Yeah, sure
that's
we are.
Good.
Well,
but it was great, though.
yeah, I look up and you're now the COO of this at the time. Now, here, this might be on me. I would say this small pharmacy. Now, maybe you weren't small. Maybe CSI Infusion is bigger than I think, but at least from a national standpoint, they're not on my radar much. I knew your CEO, I knew smart guy, and okay, he's got a nice little business down there. But compared to where it is now, it's not,
Oh
right?
my gosh, we've grown like crazy. I think when we started with the business, they had just one location at the time, right? One location,
At Texarkana?
and in lovely Texarkana, Texas. That's right. And they had just moved into like a 10,000 square foot facility. And because they were growing so much, they took on a partner in 2019 in Graham Healthcare Capital, who's been a great partner for CSI Pharmacy and has kind of been their growth engine for putting money into the organization to help scale that growth. It was I think one of the things I learned at Optum, and maybe I don't know if I'll get sued for this or what, but I think the thing I learned is that I have a passion for patient care, so much so that I was unwilling to compromise who I was as a person to be involved with another organization that didn't have the same focus on patient care as I did.
Right.
So we had an opportunity to meet James Sheets, who's the CEO of CSI Pharmacy.
Right.
Met Jay York, who's now the CMO, Chief Marketing Officer or Commercial Officer, and then Jack Limley, who's the Chief Pharmacy Officer. And it really is just a great group of people that I've enjoyed working with, and we have a great opportunity to build business. So we started as one, and now we have 4 locations that we opened. We just opened in Tampa. So it's been exciting to help build the growth of this organization and be able to scale what we're doing. But it's happening exponentially here right now.
It certainly feels kind of like you're doing that again. I gotta say, those of us who've been around start to see some, and I don't want you to speak to specifics, but I do have a question on this because I think this is a struggle for people out there when they think about being an effective leader. And I think there's an unfair criticism of really good leaders that, they're a good good old boy system, good old girl system, right? They only hire their friends. And I try to tell them some of the people that I hire are just people I trust that I've been in the trenches with. I'm starting to see some names, Randy, of some really smart people that have been in our industry for years that you've worked with, and they're kind of coming back there. I don't want you to speak specifically there, but how much do you say, hey guys, I really value the people that I've been in the trenches with before? I trust them.
There's something enormously, takes some stress off of your role as a leader, is if you can bring someone into an organization or work with someone that you've worked with in the past, that you 100% know what they do and how they do it, and that they're not fighting you along the way to get there also, right? So you're exactly right. It's people you trust. It's people you know are going to get the job done. And so, and do it the right way also. So it's been you're right. There's some recirculating names in my world. And
I've seen it. I'm like,
this
is getting the band back together. Look at that. You're like, hey,
listen, and I won't name names, but I'm also seeing other organizations kind of, you guys are like splitting the family up, like ready to go here or there.
It's a race.
You're like, all right, who's going to gobble who, right? And then you get it all. Yeah.
I can see you going to James and say, James, if we don't hire her, they will.
Yeah.
And I'm telling you, she's really good. So last question, I think, before we kind of get into our different segments here, because I don't know that I know it particularly, but I'd love to know, a couple years as COO, super growth of CSI. I've got too many C's acronyms here, by the way.
A lot of C's.
But now you're the CSO, Chief Strategy Officer. What's the different role in a national building specialty infusion? What in the world is the difference now?
I'd say the biggest difference is what you focus on, right? So, and what you have responsibility for. So as a COO, you have more direct responsibility over the components of the organization that are the operators. So the pharmacy, the nursing, the intake, what we call the operators, right? The people that get the work done. As CSO, my main focus is in the strategy of those organizations. So where we're going to be in 3 to 5 years, how we can start to make decisions and start to move in a direction that gets us ready for 3 to 5 years. And then how can I help build growth and value? So I also do a lot of acquisition stuff. If we look at that, I do business development. I do a little bit of everything. And then I work with the leaders to help. I'm an old guy now, right? So I'm an old guy in the industry. So I help mentor people, and I help to do a better job at what they're doing as well. So that's kind of my role as a strategy officer. I get to work with everybody, but I don't have responsibility for many of them. How about that?
That sounds perfect. I get to
good
impact
one.
everybody, but
right.
Everybody's a dotted line to me, but nobody actually works for me. This is great.
Right. Yeah, it has its goals and excitement for sure.
This is good. Well, thinking about our first segment, Pam, I'm going to turn it over to you, Pam. You're the person on our podcast that's really about operations, right? And operations in this world is about patients. So I'll let you kind of go from there.
Well, my wheels are turning because in my former role, I worked a lot with new markets, and being first on the ground, what you have to do, we're not talking brick and mortar, but we're talking about the relationships and trying to get people to take care of these people. How, as far as your experience building nursing capabilities in some of these areas where you don't exist previously, what's your philosophy, and do you have any secret sauce or any type of recommendations for people as they start to establish in a basically a foreign land?
Well, I think I don't want to give up too much secret sauce. How about that? But I'll give up some secret sauce. I'll put a little bit out there. The main thing truly is if you have a great nursing leader, that really helps. You can't begin to value your nursing leader as much as you need to when you're growing and expanding. So first of all, you need to have a great leader at the top that's able to help drive the right initiatives. Number two, you got to plan. You got to plan where you're going to be. So for instance, we now have like 65 salespeople in the country, and they're out looking for business all across the country. So we have to know where they're working so that we can begin to start recruiting nurses in that area as well. So you have to kind of be on front of the game, a good 3 to 6 months in front of the game. Then if you find the right people, I'd say you can employ a strategy of guaranteeing a certain amount of hours for a nurse in a particular area if you know you're going to have business growth there and there's not a huge opportunity cost that is taken that way, right? You can help secure great people and have them at the ready for that next referral. And then, of course, you have to understand the regulatory environment that you're in, Pam. So you can't just open a shop everywhere and expect to have results, right? So you may have to work with great agencies. So we also have some great agencies that we work with that help support some of that patient growth too, because sometimes you use the agencies until you can build it yourself, or you use the agency because of a regulatory requirement that's causing that. So I don't know if that was enough information, but that's kind of the general basics there.
Well, I think the certificate of need is a hamstring for a lot of people now.
For sure. Absolutely.
So on the other hand, nursing profitability, and I hate to be all about the dollars, but unless we make money, we can't take care of people. And how do you begin to balance that when you're trying to start up? There's got to be some type of ebb and flow, or at least some type of allowance for the hands-on that you really can't quantify.
Well, I think number one, as much as possible, I like to control the nursing. So what I mean by that is I like it to be employed by CSI Pharmacy if it's at all possible. When I have the employed relationship, I absolutely can demand a certain quality and demand a certain outcome, because it's so important when you open up a new referral in an area that you don't send a nurse behind this that's going to maybe not give great service or not really know what they're doing. So it's extremely important for that value. So I'm willing to pay more for that on the front end, right? I know what it costs. In order to be successful in this world, you have to understand what it costs for you to send a nurse that you work for, that works for you, or send a nurse for an agency, what those costs are going to be, and then help evaluate that so you can come up with an ROI on, well, if I do this 2 or 3 patients through this process, I at least know I'll begin to break even on what this nursing cost is. Because the truth is, it's hard to build nursing. It's sort of in our industry, unfortunately, it's an afterthought on how to best bill. Not that we don't bill, but just that it's difficult to bill, and then it's difficult to make sure that you're billing enough, because every agreement I've ever seen is under cost of what it is for me to provide the nurse, or for what it is for me to pay for a nursing agency. Yeah. So it's almost like unfortunately, it's a cost of doing business right now, right? You have to make it up on the drug or the drug per diem so that you can actually try to find the right way to take care of patients. In order to do that, we have to make money. Absolutely.
Yeah.
can thank the payers
Well,
for
if you're
that,
really
right?
good at it,
Yeah.
you break even.
Well, I mean, breaking even is a great step for nursing, right? If we can just break even instead of costing, I mean, it can be as much as $550 for a nursing visit. We do IG, so they're long visits, right? Plus you have traveling costs, other stuff. So you have to manage your costs the best you can, and having local nurses sometimes helps do that.
Yeah. So one more question I have for you is, in my former role, the speed to auth has become a huge obstruction for people in the learning curve for companies that are trying to establish a presence, whether it's an AIC or home infusion. And it really has a lot to do with not only the knowledge of your workforce, but the changing requirements at the payer level. Have you had any success with your own minions, trying to break through that learning curve? What do you recommend as far as trying to, and not only with the training, but do you have a yardstick for what you think the ideal length to auth would be? What would be your gold standard? Not dreaming, but realistically.
It truthfully just depends on whether we're going through pharmacy benefits or whether we're going through medical benefits, right? There are times that we do both, and we do what we can. John, you almost wanted to say something there. What did you want to say? Nope.
No.
All right, you got interested. All right, you
I'm going
perked
to
up.
yell, but it's okay. I was going to yell about PBMs, but I just chose not to.
Decided not to. All right. So really, in my world, I think a 3 to 5 day pharmacy auth is the right amount of time. It shouldn't take longer than that. Really, it's a 48-hour process is what it should be. In a medical world, if I can get to 14 days in this industry, I feel that 14 days probably puts you above average in our industry. If you can get to a 10-day or a single day mark, like 9-day, with medical benefits, you're doing something incredible, and you maybe have a portal or you have some opportunity there. So I think outside of training, unfortunately in our world, everything has become so remote. So it's difficult sometimes as a remote employee to, even though you have a training program, to have a reach out point where you can reach out and ask a question. Right? Because I remember when I learned home infusion, I had a nurse sitting right next to me, and I had a biller sitting right next to me, and I had, even a collector sitting right next to me. So I could turn and I could ask a question and I could learn instantly. But we don't have that in this world, other than I'll Teams you, or I'll send an email to you and hope you respond sometime today. So in addition to training, resources for questions is a big piece of learning, because this is a business you think you know, and then 3 months later, you're like, oh my God, I didn't know that. And then 6 months later, you realize you've doubled your knowledge. And it takes a good 2 years for great knowledge in our world, right? So I think that's just being available and being able to answer questions is also a great supplement to a good training program.
That's a great segment to my rant. Okay, so I'm always going to open up. I opened up with my rant, Randy, but
I love a rant.
You've known me long enough to know that me ranting is not a problem, right? I'm pretty good at it. So I love to ask, so my world revenue cycle, 2 or 3 frustrations. When you look around, multi-state, revenue cycle management, trying to get paid, like what rises to the top for you, and just like current frustrations that you see?
I only have to limit it to 3. Okay. I would say that for us, really, denials for additional information, documentation is something that's been driving us crazy, because they tell you on the front end you don't need prior auth, right? And then on the back end they deny for additional information, or it may not be medically necessary. So that's one of the issues that drives us crazy. Maybe another one is dealing with overpayments, right? So on an overpayment, just the amount of resources you have to devote to be able to kind of work within that system and be able to make sure you do what's right, but also you don't want to lose your shirt when you're doing what's right. And then maybe if I might have 2 more, there's repricers, right? The repricers not getting the claims to the payers for processing, right? Somehow they get lost in translation at times. And then just this, back to the authorization, there's no great connector between the people that are giving you your benefits and telling you about authorization on the front end with the people on the back end when you bill, right? It's you may feel like you have an authorization, but then on the back it says you don't have an authorization or it doesn't connect well. So I think the disconnection between the front end and back end in our business is kind of what's causing us our biggest grief points. And we haven't even talked about pharmacy payers, right? Some of the pharmacy payers are even worse.
Yeah, so. And you know what? I'll say this because I tell everybody who comes on, I get to say the thing that you don't say, right? So don't nod in agreement so somebody gets mad, but I'll say it, right? So you can say, I didn't say it, okay? But you cannot convince me that these things weren't set up. They're just accidents. They're not accidents. You're trying to keep our money. If you keep our money to the 32nd day, the $500 million that should have been paid out has got a great interest payment for your stakeholders. There's no question about it. And that's the frustration. I'll tell you why I asked those questions. And I'll ask you how surprised you are at this, right? Premier just did a study across, hundreds of infusion providers. 15% of all claims that have an auth and were billed correctly are being denied. 15%. Across, is that surprising to you?
I'm surprised it's only 15%.
I say 100%.
If I'm being honest.
The first thing I said, only 15? I thought 27. I thought quarter of all claims. Yeah.
I would have thought 100% because it feels that way, right? It's an automatic denial on the front end. It does feel that way.
Yeah, and
15% of the claims with 50% of the dollars.
That's just it. We're not talking about it, Brian. We're not this isn't HME. And listen, we love our HME brothers and sisters, right? But we don't have $150 claims, right? These claims are not all claims are the same. This is not an E&M code, okay, for a runny nose. This is the capital that we put out to put this drug out there that this patient needs is extremely, it's not, I was like, oh, well, you guys have 50% margins. No, we don't have margins like that.
Not anymore.
Not anymore. This isn't the 90s at TPN when you needed like 19 patients and you could just go home. You're like, I'm fine, Randy. We're fine. We got our 20th TPN patient in 96, so we're like, we just went home.
Man, that was a great.
Everybody's like, what about patient pay? Just write it off. We don't care.
That's where you throw a smokestack party there at the Reds stadium, right? Right, Randy? You're like, exactly
right. We got 21 TPN patients. We're fine. Yeah. So last question for me, and I'm going to steal a little bit from Brian. Brian, we'll go to you next because Brian's our payer. When you're thinking about markets, do you think about payers in those markets? Are there markets you say, hell no, we're not going to that because blah, blah, blah is there. And I'm telling you right now, like or you're saying, no, that's not the big driver. Is it a piece? Is it a big piece? What do you think?
I think it depends on your approach, right? So I think if you go into a market, you have to understand a payer mix in order for you to really come away with realistic expectations about what your conversion rate's going to be for the referrals you drive into that market, right? So I think understanding the payer coverage is important going in. That way you'll be able to devote the right amount of resources to what you actually have the opportunity for. And then if we're talking about, do I evaluate payers as it relates to brick and mortar and whether I need to be in a particular state in order to take advantage of some of that stuff, I would say that as we've expanded, I've absolutely considered the payer mix and what that looks like in the state in order for us to open up location number 4, and location number 5 will come soon. And it has to be considered because it's such a big thing for our business, Jon.
Yeah, it has to be. Are you ready to tell us 5 or is that still baking?
It's still in the baking process right now. Okay. It'll be out west somewhere.
But is Tampa open?
Tampa's officially open. We're still working to finalize the DEA, get accreditation. So we're about a month or 2 away from being able to dispense out of the location, but it's open and about ready for business.
So, before I hand it off to Brian, just walk us through because we want to, again, for CSI, you got Texarkana. And then it went to, is it Ohio next?
Yeah, Cincinnati, Ohio, which just happens to be where I am today, right? Okay. In our Cincinnati location, it's where I live. We had an opportunity to open one of the locations that the Big O closed up in Enfield, Connecticut, is where we are up in Connecticut. So we picked up a great staff up there that had great understanding where we are. So we have one in Enfield, Connecticut. And then Tampa ended up opening as a result of just an evaluation of wanting to be in the Southeast. And that's where we landed based on the healthcare market that it is and the amount of opportunity there.
Will you push? I'm stealing all of Brian's time. Will you push out from Florida, from Tampa? Like, will Tampa say, "Hey, Tampa's a central serve, and we're going to go to Georgia"? Or would you say, "No, we'd want to put a pharmacy in Georgia. We want to put a," or do you not know?
It's a great question. I think after location number 5 for us, which will be more of a Western distribution kind of a place, I think what we'll begin to go to, John, is an evaluation of the payer mix in each market, and then we'll determine how best to postage stamp a pharmacy somewhere that gives us the right opportunity based on the referrals that we have coming in and the opportunity that payer or those payers might give us through that postage stamp location, right? So that's how I'm looking at it.
It's a smart way, man. I mean, it looks like tell James I need to buy in. Tell him I call. I think it's going to be worth a lot. Brian, we just talked about payer mix and health systems and all the things that are your world. I'm going to let you jump in.
Yeah, Randy, there's some people on this podcast that know you really well. As I looked at your resume, I know all the companies you've worked for, but I don't know you. But I don't know if you know this. We made a connection when you said something about telling the wrong person the right thing in your career, right?
Is that right? Yeah.
So I did that early in my career, which is why I've been a consultant for 25 years. I just was not going to make it long in big corporate world because I had a habit of doing that, right? So anyways, you were smart enough to do it late in your career, and I did it early and often. So anyways, that said, thinking about payers, we've got Optum, which you worked for. We've got Aetna, which kind of really is, they're almost branding products with CVS now on the Medicare Advantage side. Cigna, other payers that have specialty pharmacy, not to mention PBMs, home infusion therapy capabilities. Do you see that as a threat to the industry, or can they only go so large in terms of maybe serving their own customers, or do you think that it has a limiting effect on your business, or does it the service and make it widgets? What are your thoughts on payer integration of pharmacy?
I think that it's certainly, for a business like mine, limits our ability to take care of patients at times, right? So there are patients that we're not able to serve, and so some of that is as a result of payer mandated pharmacies. So certainly it impacts us negatively from a growth perspective. As far as the impact on the industry, I think that people are beginning to become frustrated with their lack of ability to pick their pharmacy, I think. And as patients become more sophisticated in what their rights are and what those, what they can do, I believe that we'll begin to see pushback on these vertically integrated pharmacies and their ability to be the only choice for a patient, right? Or at least the primary choice, unless they fight really hard with their employer group or what have you. So I do think there's sort of a negative connotation to the widget component of it, right? Because if you're not incentivized to find the patients, you may not be incentivized to maybe take care of the patients in the same way that I might be having to take care of a patient, because I want to make sure that I'm getting the business and I'm able to support what I'm saying we're going to do. So, I mean, that could be an assumption. It's maybe not fair to say that fully, but that's my opinion on it. So,
do you see payers offering you exclusive agreements where you cover 30,000 Medicare Advantage lives and it's your job, or are you still mostly in the fee-for-service world?
We're finding little pockets here and there. I think Texas is the state we've been in the longest. So we are finding opportunities in Texas to maybe have some of those carve-outs for a Medicare Advantage plan that maybe other people aren't doing, or at least allows us to be a preferred status for those. But we're not being given a ton of those opportunities across the country right now, Brian. It's not something that, it's not like we're not looking for it, right? I'm still asking to be preferred. We have a managed care team that calls on payers across the country. And so it's just not being offered much to a pharmacy my size. Okay. And
Flipping the other side of it, when we look at integrated delivery systems and ACOs and some of the Medicare rules of penalties for readmissions and things like that, post-acute has a big impact on that, of time to service, right? Does a patient get their DME? Do they get their their home care? Do they get their infusion? That clinical outcome. I think hospitals are also looking, they've lost imaging to some degree. They're losing outpatient surgery. They're losing ED visits to urgent care. Everybody's cannibalizing things other than, beds, right? Patients that are in beds. Do you see health systems getting back into infusion? It's a different business than running, a campus-based service like a hospital and clinics or employing physicians. Do you see it? Do you have hopes for them? Do you see a rough and rocky future for them getting into this business because it's different billing, different coding, different staffing?
I think the assumption is that their belief is it's the same, right? That's the first initial mistake that a lot of those companies that do that is that it's the same kind of thing that we deal with at hospital. We can just internalize the billing through the hospital. But really from a service perspective, if you think about what's happened in our industry over the last 2, even 3 years with some of the reimbursement changes, you mentioned post-acute, but you think about all the big companies that have closed traditional home infusion pharmacies and began focusing primarily on the kind of stuff we're doing, specialty infusion. Mm-hmm. If the hospitals don't pick up that component of this world, I mean, it's going to be potentially problematic for some of those readmissions and some of the breaks because there really is limited access outside of infusion suites. And, Reese does a great job with those. And I'm a big fan of Reese Norris. So I think that there's opportunities there. But as we look into them getting into the business that I do and more the chronic stuff, I think that they're all seeking the opportunity to take advantage of some of the revenues available in our world. That won't just be hospital systems. I've seen physician groups do the same thing, right? They're trying to figure out where they can pick up the dollars that they're missing from the new cuts of this payer or that payer. And I've seen hospital systems do this well already, Brian. I mean, I think Houston's probably I've seen some great stuff in Houston. I've seen some great stuff in Cleveland, other locations where they're capturing a lot of the market that they're generating. And so it's a threat to companies like mine. But I think if it helps patients in the long run and they're able to do it right, then it's probably a great way to help support the ACO environment for sure.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that the reality of the situation is in a world that seems to be getting sicker and sicker. I wish that weren't the case, right? Maybe we're not getting sicker. Maybe we just are finding out that we're sicker and we've always been sick. I don't know. But either way, right? Which I think if I didn't have a treatment back then, I wouldn't want to know either. But I mean, it's going to continue to be enough patients. The question is, are we going to take care of patients? And listen, one thing that goes on in Texas really well is you got good payers there, right? Like, all of my clients
good payers
are going ballistic because they've got great payers, and you're like, all right, we'll go to New York. You're like, oh, wait a second. Maybe I don't want to go to New York. Maybe I don't want to go to Massachusetts on everything, because the payer environment is so different. And so,
right.
Yeah. Brandon Carpenter, I know I want to leave some time. Obviously, you've known Randy for 47 years. And you guys,
we say 10 plus in my we're at the 10
you just leave it at that, 10 plus, and you don't say how long it really. Okay, that's fair. Okay.
10
that's
plus.
Like he's saying I'm over 40. Yes, just over 40. Don't worry about it. And so I'll let you talk for a little bit. Yeah.
So Randy, it's really great to see you again. And we've got some fun war stories, but one of the things that's really interesting to me, right? So you've gone from small to big to back to small and now building it back up. The role of technology in that, right? So 15 years ago when you were building an organization, you're building it, like you said, centralized out of the Cincinnati area and all this kind of stuff. And now kind of, repurposing that knowledge and stuff. How has technology really changed the approach that you take in scaling your organization?
It's so crazy. I would say, even as I was looking at Tampa, you'd be amazed at what ChatGPT can tell you about a payer market or a healthcare environment or where the best city to put a pharmacy is in a location. So we didn't have that in the old days, right, Brandon? So I guess the technology and the available information is so much greater than it ever was growing. I mean, I'm not even sure I had a dial-up connection 15 years ago. Did I? I mean, I guess maybe I did,
Yeah.
but it's so different now.
Yeah.
It's evolved completely, and really our reliance on technology to try to do the things that we do day to day has completely changed as well. So in order to grow, you almost have to embrace technology even more these days than you ever would have. So I'm a big fan of tech.
So are you saying your whole role is supported by a $20 a month ChatGPT membership? Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely. Don't tell James. Don't tell James.
No one tell
Your
James.
secret stay with me. Yeah, and you know that's interesting. So I was just at Careform and they were talking about that. You know, they have Google Analytics guys and stuff there talking about, you know, AI and the integration into healthcare. So I'm just curious, what are you guys beyond, you know, writing your policies and procedures and your, you know, accreditation things that you need ChatGPT to do? Are you integrating AI into anything currently?
I think AI is still tough in our world because the AI that's good for us is reading documents. Most of our business comes across in a document or a fax. Unfortunately, that's still how a lot of our business hits. So, I mean, I think there's AI. We aren't utilizing the data entry components of AI yet. We've considered that. We also aren't using that for benefits investigation yet. I think we have to think about what that could look like in the near future because it costs money to pay people to do things, and it's somewhat less expensive to do the tech approach if you can get the right answers. So we still have a little bit of lack of faith in necessarily AI, and we're trying to evolve, though.
We don't want Skynet to become self-aware just yet, is
Right.
what you're saying. Yeah,
Exactly.
No, I got you.
And I'm not Sarah Connor, just so you know.
It's interesting, right? So you talk about, you know, proximity and obviously, you know, decentralizing it. So, you know, obviously with the pandemic, you know, and still, you know, seemingly close in our rearview mirrors and stuff. How did that, you know, bust up the whole? Because I think about, like you mentioned, Houston and obviously Columbus and Cincinnati, and you know, we have these pockets of populations that are really knowledgeable in our industry. And so now with the technology and then us just basically throwing a bomb in our whole cultural perspective of people have to be, you know, you made a great comment about, you know, when you were learning, you could grab a nurse right here and grab a biller over here and bring us together. How did COVID change the way, A, that you operated, and then B, the way you found talent?
Yeah, it's completely changed everything in our world, truthfully. It's made it so that remote jobs are more available now. And so it's really hard to find great people these days, especially great people that want to come into an office if you want them to come into an office when they can find a role that's remote.
100%, yeah.
The other thing is, you know, even the people that we interact with, so the organizations, the payers, the folks that we interact with, all of those folks are also still remote. So you're kind of on different times with people as you go through it. So I think it's changed the way we do business and the way we like, I can't tell you until COVID how many conference calls I was on a given day with people that was our one-on-one time, right? You used to travel places and get this done. Right. So I think the thing that is the most different with talent is trying to decipher the BS factor when you're interviewing someone, when you're not in person, is a little bit more of there's more of a skill there than there ever used to be. And then trying to find the right questions to make the BS factor, I guess, evident is the right way to say that. So that's a difficult challenge for finding good people. And then incorporating that with a follow-up in-person visit, I think is still important for us. Really make sure you understand who people are and that they really are who they say they are. So it's been a challenge to find resources, Brandon, for sure.
Yeah. And then obviously from a technology standpoint, you know, how are you utilizing technology to kind of manage that with KPIs and metrics and things like that?
I never thought in my life I'd talk about a data lake, right? I mean, I never thought in my life that I'd think to even say data lake. But I think the thing that we're doing is we're pulling all of the data we can from the systems that we use, and we're trying to compile it into a meaningful way to help us manage our business in the KPI world, right? And so sometimes in order to make that meaningful, you have to put it into the system to make it meaningful too. There's some learnings that go into it, Brandon, but I think what we're doing is trying to find the right extraction tools to where we can do what we need to do individually and then only reach out to people like yourself to help us with the finer skill activities that you might need someone that's got some real industry knowledge to do.
I know that's, and you mentioned earlier, it takes you 2 years to learn that and 100%. Learn the business. And, when you get to the technology side of things and melding those together, it's like even more, right? And so now, again, going back to, our many years in the trenches together, I remember, back in my previous world, at Rock Pond and stuff, I was known as Mr. Synergist, and Synergist was the pinnacle and genesis of pharma reporting, right? And
I want to point out that nobody, when they grow up, wants to be known as Mr. Synergist.
No one.
Right.
Ever so.
Right. Most likely to succeed, best hair. Nobody wants to be voted Mr. Synergist.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Mr. Synergist. Sorry to interrupt.
Thank you. But, and then obviously from Synergist kind of, but got into some hemophilia stuff. And then it kind of slowly trickled into IG world of pharma wanting their data. Compared to then, what are you seeing from a data to revenue strategy on what these, manufacturers are wanting? How in depth could you have ever imagined it, or is it just kind of the same thing now, like as it was before?
I would say initially when I first started interacting with IG data reporting and trying to build something to report to, this manufacturer, that manufacturer, it's gotten a lot more sophisticated to what it's asking. So now I'm beginning to have to code my interactions with the payer so that I can make sure that I identify one of the 7 codes I have to use in order for it to connect to what data I have to report. Other than that, I think also they already get a lot of data from other sources. So there are times I feel like I'm the fill-in data guy where I help connect the dots between maybe what they don't have and what they'd like to have and what they're getting. So it's changed 1,000 times over between what they used to ask and what now. I'm giving things that are so much detail now that it's ridiculous. It's changed quite a bit, Brandon. I feel like Wilson is who I'm talking to right now from Brandon. Remember Wilson from Tim the Tool Guy?
Randy, we're wrapping up here. It's just been a fascinating conversation. I can't tell you how thankful we are to have somebody with your much breadth of all these subjects there, because you can talk to folks who have sat in certain seats that kind of educationally know these things, but you know what? They haven't filled a script, or they've never been in a clean room, or they've never been, hey, do you know what a delivery driver does? It's been great. And I think that's what makes you great at what you do. And just want to say, one, thanks for being here. It's a fantastic segment. But 2, bravo to you guys for what you're building. And it shows the rest of us that, listen, if you put the right people together, you want to put patients first, you really can go out there and build something fun. I do think it's unique. Your second pharmacy was in Cincinnati where you live. And that's a big major play where you're like, hey, where should we open a pharmacy? Why don't we do it where I live? Okay, that's great. That's a power play there. So you're going to have to
play. That had nothing to do to not wanting to fly into Texarkana airport, right?
I've flown in that airport. Yeah.
It's a difficult place to get. Usually people tell me, I've driven through Texarkana. That's how they know Texarkana, because you drive from this.
Yeah. Last question before we wrap up here is, your Buckeyes sit number 3, right? 5 votes this week. Will they run the table, or will you just piss off Michigan enough that they say all we want to do is ruin your season? How does that end? I want your prediction on the record.
Well, I think that we have an opportunity to go really far, right? I mean, I think that every year. But this particular year, I feel like we should beat Michigan soundly. However, after watching the game this weekend with USC and Michigan, it's like they may have a real quarterback again. And so it looked a little concerning. I'll be open and honest. So I feel like this is the year that we get past the three losses in a row. And we'll do pretty well, I believe, in the playoffs. So
as much as I don't want to agree with you, I don't want to agree with you because I obviously am not an Ohio State fan. I agree. I think you run the table. So I'm hoping it for you, my friend. Hey, Randy, thanks so much for joining us. Everybody, this has been Beyond the Drip, a podcast about all things infusion with our guest, the Chief Strategy Officer for CSI Pharmacy, Randy Broyles. We hope you have a great day. Find this podcast everywhere that you get your podcasts, at Apple, at Spotify, and everywhere.